But I just want to throw a few critical thoughts out there. And energy security does start at home. And it's really not like the UK and using grid interconnects around to Morocco or anywhere else that they're considering. You've got to have your minerals and process them here. Unbelievable that we have let China have 90% of the processing capability of critical minerals. So, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Energy News Beat Daily Stand-Up. My name's Stuart Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. It is just way too much fun on the news desk today. Let's start with our critical stories for today. Critical minerals are not the problem that China controls. It's the processing of the mineral ore that they control. That's a pretty big story coming around the corner here. Trump targets the EPA endangerment finding after Supreme Court rulings. You got to love a good target story from old President Trump. Trump tariffs reshape MENA oilfield services. This has a global perspective, and it's the Middle East, North African area that this article talks about, not MENA, Arkansas, for those folks. And when you sit back and take a look, the last article here is Iraq's oil embargo was never about oil. We're going to be running some stories also about how this is going to be impacting the United States, the tariff wars and the supply chain, on how investors are going to be looking at investments in the United States. So, pretty big stuff coming around the corner. Let's start with our first story here. Critical minerals are not the problem that China controls, it's the processing of the mineral ore they control. Got this idea from David Blackman, who is an absolute wonderful energy leader, and he has got a great Substack. It's Energy Absurdities at substack.com, and he has got a right on the money here. When you take a look at the illustration on the map, it shows where the rare earth or critical minerals are around the world, is that the rare earth production is where the problem is. 90% of the rare earth production is in China. That is important. And I started trying to take a look what is really critical right now, and it is high tech and talking like war materials and everything else. And so I started taking a look and I asked, what is going on with gallium? And you take a look at, there is only one proposed new facility to take ore, and that would be in, let's see, owned by Trafigura, exploring 150 million germanium and gallium recovery processing facility at its zinc smelter in Tennessee. This project is in the viability testing stage and not yet operational. 12 to 18 months. This is the shortest critical mineral that I can see that's out there right now. And that's pretty darn exciting. That I bet they could fast track that bed if they need to. But I just want to throw a few critical thoughts out there. And energy security does start at home. And it's really not like the UK and using grid interconnects around to Morocco or anywhere else that they're considering. You've got to have your minerals and process them here. Unbelievable that we have let China have 90% of the processing capability of critical minerals. So if you think you want an energy transition, you're going to have rare earth minerals in order to do it, or critical minerals as they are aptly called. So pretty interesting story there. Trump, the next story, Trump targets the EPA endangerment findings after Supreme Court rulings. This is really a great story from Issues and Insights. And this one was really, when you sit back and take a look, Trump moves to scrap the EPA endangerment findings, citing Supreme Court rulings and lack of congressional okay regulating greenhouse gases. I imagine the reversal would be accomplished over a course of at least a year and probably accurately through the conventional administrative process of notice in public, but things may get much more exciting and more quickly, as the author is saying here. The EF is a December 2029 determination by the Obama EPA that the emissions of greenhouse gases harm the public health and welfare. And this is going to be huge in order to save money for not shutting down coal plants. It's the particulate matter that is actually the pollution, and having scrubbers and filters on there does make all the difference in the world, so that clean coal is more clean than it used to be, and that you do not have to put it into the CO2 is actually plant food last time we scientifically checked. One of the recent Supreme Court decisions listed in the executive orders is 2022 West Virginia versus the EPA. In that case, the court held that the Obama's EPA 2015 Clean Power Plan, an ironic prodigy of the EF, was unconstitutional. Under the court's new adopted major questions doctrine, the significant regulatory agency programs requires express congressional authorization. The regulation of greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuel burning is an actually major question, and Congress never expressly gave the EPA authority to regulate greenhouse gases. This is absolutely what we voted for, and this is huge. Getting it, Congress has failed to do your job. If you're a congressional member, I would love to visit with you. Senator Cruz, you are always welcome on the show. In fact, if you're a Democrat or Republican and you want to talk about your views on energy and finance and how it applies, we want to help get your story out there, and we've got reach. So please reach out to the show. We want to talk to you. We want to hear both sides of the story. We just want the facts. Anyway, let's go to the next story here. And you'll see that I'm wearing my Reese Energy Consulting hat. And I absolutely love this hat. I got to wear it with my interview you do not want to miss with Steve Reese. And he and I were sitting there talking. We were there with Mark Stansberry, and Steve Reese is a sponsor of the Energy Newsbeat podcast. Shout out to him, ReeseEnergyConsulting.com. They are working to help solve the natural gas solutions around the United States. And they actually understand transmitting molecules all the way from the Haynesville all the way to Germany, and how to make sure you get the best bang for your buck in transmitting those molecules and moving them around. Or if you're a data center and you want to say, where do I want to put my plant? They understand how to put a plant together and what you need in order to get a pipeline in there, or how do you all these things in. They got all the answers there. So let's get ready to rumble. And the article from Rystad Energy did not have really that definition of what MENA was. And so I added the whole list of all of the operators that were there and what they basically have in their mounts that they output and everything else to help make that a lot easier to go through. They are everybody from Iraq National Oil Company, the Iranian National, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, Qatar, Algeria, Sontrak, National Oil Corporation of Libya, and Oman. But when we get into the story here from Rystad, U.S. tariffs had disrupted global oil supply chains, leading to increased cost and promoting shifts in sourcing categories. The oilfield service companies are benefiting from these disruptions due to their localized supply chains and proximity to clients, offering shorter lead times and competitive pricing. That is a huge understatement as it applies to the United States, which is steel for the pipe. We're talking all the other kind of stuff. If you're trying to put in new pipelines or anything else, this is going to be a big deal shortly. The Trump administration tariff regime intended to boost U.S. manufacturing and punitive damages on Chinese manufacturing has disrupted multiple industrial supply chains, into the U.S. with cascading effects across other regions. For the Middle East and North Africa, regions oilfield services are affect indirect but may be significant if unmitigated by national oil companies. With the U.S. turning more inward, these companies can pivot to sourcing to take advantage of foreign sources looking for new customers, particularly in China. So this is actually going to be very much like Miramar. I was sitting there trying to take a look at China, visiting with how the export from Miramar to China and the amount of oil that they produce there is very Malaysia. You sit back and take a look in Malaysia to China, and you can all of a sudden count how much is being shipped from the dark fleet by looking at who is shipping, and Malaysia showed up into new contracts as being a source for Iranian or Iraq oil going to China via that channel. So you sit back and kind of go, China is still going to be buying a lot of oil, and this is going to make a huge difference. You also have the UAE, ADNOC have already expanded the use of integrated service contract, growing from 35% to 47% on its onshore and offshore assets through this. So pretty exciting stuff going on in the Middle East as taking advantage of new sales to China and their supply lines. The last story for today is Iraq's oil embargo was never just about oil. I found this, it was very interesting. This was from oilprice.com, Simon Watkins. Simon, in fact, I was going to interview Simon on the podcast at one time, and I had COVID, so it would kind of I have to reach back out to him to get him on the podcast. But he brings up some fantastic points. The oil dispute between Baghdad and the Kurdistan region, the KRI is about sovereignty, not oil. Iraq's federal Supreme Court and the proposed United Oil Law have cemented Baghdad's control over oil revenues, ending the KRI's ability to export independently. This is huge. Turkey's new pipelines plans bypassing Kurdistan aligned with China's Belt and Road Initiative, wider geopolitical shifts and efforts to marginalize Western influence in the region. I'm telling you, you're out multiple fronts in the geopolitical front right now. And we're seeing new formulations of not only alliances, but rethinking old alliances. And as we get through this tariff right sizing, and remember, these are in right sizing trade. If you're not charging the United States anything, he's going to get it, trade balances back down to zero so that we can all trade equally back and forth. But in the meantime, President Trump is on the right track. And I'm standing with him on what he's trying to do as the United States can imagine the pain that we're in right now if the United States totally failed and we were actually gone. It would, the world's financial systems would actually be even worse off than they are. So I'll take a few months of a little bit of a pain and with a few questions lingering on, as opposed to being totally bankrupt and being totally overrun by the communist China, as opposed to being totally out of business. So there's a lot of good things that we are getting teed up for some much better things coming around the corner. So with that, like, subscribe, share, and please hug your kids and go out and be epic today. Have an absolutely wonderful day. We'll talk to you all.